I still remember the exact smell of antiseptic and burnt coffee in that hospital waiting room, like it got trapped somewhere deep in my chest and never left. It's strange what your brain holds onto when your life splits in two. Before that night, I thought I knew my husband better than anyone on earth. After that night, I realized I didn't know him at all. His name is Daniel. We'd been married for 4 years at that point. We lived in a quiet suburb just outside of Denver, the kind of neighborhood where everyone waves but nobody really knows each other. We had a 2-story house with white siding, a backyard we barely used, and a kitchen that always smelled faintly like vanilla candles because I was obsessed with keeping everything perfect. I worked in finance, pulling in more money than I ever thought I would at 32. And Daniel? Well, Daniel had bounced between jobs. Marketing, sales, some startup that didn't last more than 8 months. He always had an explanation, always had charm. That charm is what got me in the first place. The night everything changed started like any other. I had just gotten home from work, heels in my hand, hair falling out of the tight bun I'd forced it into at 7 a.m. Daniel was already there, sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone like he always did when he was between opportunities, as he liked to call it. "You're late," he said, not even looking up. "I had a client call run over," I replied, dropping my bag on the kitchen counter. Again. He shrugged like it didn't matter, like my job wasn't the reason we could afford the house he was sitting in. That should have bothered me more back then, but it didn't, not yet. We ordered takeout, watched half of some show neither of us cared about, and went to bed. It was all so normal, it almost makes me sick thinking about it now. I woke up around 2:30 in the morning to a sound I couldn't place. At first, I thought it was something outside, maybe a car alarm or someone slamming a door. But then I heard it again, a sharp, choking gasp. I sat up so fast my head spun. "Daniel?" I whispered. No response. I turned on the lamp and saw him. His face was pale, his body tense, one hand clutching his chest like he was trying to hold himself together. His breathing was shallow, uneven, like each inhale was a fight. "Daniel," I shook him, harder this time. His eyes fluttered open, but they didn't focus on me. "It hurts," he managed to say, barely audible. Everything after that felt like a blur and slow motion at the same time. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and called 911, my voice barely steady enough to give our address. I remember pacing, barefoot on the cold hardwood floor, trying to keep him awake, telling him over and over, you're okay, stay with me," even though I had no idea if that was true. The paramedics arrived within minutes, though it felt like hours. They moved quickly, efficiently, asking questions I struggled to answer. One of them mentioned a possible heart attack, and I felt my stomach drop like I just missed a step in the dark. At 34, Daniel wasn't supposed to have a heart attack. I rode in the ambulance with him, gripping his hand so tightly I was afraid I might hurt him. He didn't seem to notice. His eyes were half closed, his breathing still uneven. Machines beeped in a rhythm that felt too fragile, like it could stop at any second. "Stay with me," I kept saying, over and over, like if I stopped, he would too. At the hospital, everything became a whirlwind of movement and noise. Doctors, nurses, bright lights, doors swinging open and shut. They rushed him away from me before I could even process what was happening, leaving me standing there with nothing but my racing thoughts and the echo of those beeping machines. I don't know how long I sat in that waiting room. It could have been an hour, maybe 3. Time didn't feel real anymore. I just stared at the floor, my hands clasped together so tightly they hurt. I kept thinking about stupid things, the laundry I hadn't folded, the argument we'd had 2 days earlier about him forgetting to pay a credit card bill, the way I almost told him I was tired of carrying everything on my own. And then the guilt hit. What if those were the last things we'd said to each other? What if the last version of him he remembered was annoyed, frustrated, distant? I felt like I was suffocating. When the doctor finally came out, I shot to my feet so fast I nearly tripped over the chair. "Are you his wife?" he asked. "Yes," I said immediately, my voice cracking. "Is he?" "He's alive." I don't think I've ever felt relief like that. My knees actually buckled and I had to grab onto the back of the chair to steady myself.
He had a severe cardiac event, the doctor continued. We were able to stabilize him, but it was close, very close. Close. That word stayed with me. He's going to need ongoing treatment, lifestyle changes, medication. And frankly, he's lucky you got him here when you did. Lucky. I nodded, even though my brain was still catching up. Can I see him? Briefly, the doctor said. He's still very weak. When I finally walked into his room, I barely recognized him. He looked smaller somehow, swallowed by the hospital bed and all the wires attached to him. His skin was still pale, his eyes heavy, but they opened when I stepped closer. "Hey," I whispered. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Then slowly his hand reached for mine. "You stayed," he said, his voice rough. The words hit me harder than I expected. "Of course I did," I replied, squeezing his hand. "I'm your wife." Something flickered in his eyes then. I thought it was gratitude, maybe even love. Looking back, I realize it might have been something else entirely. The next few days were a blur of hospital visits, phone calls, and trying to hold everything together. I took time off work without even thinking about it. None of it mattered except him getting better. I handled the insurance calls, spoke to the doctors, filled prescriptions, coordinated follow-ups. I slept in that uncomfortable chair next to his bed more nights than I can count, waking up every time one of those machines made a sound that didn't feel right. People kept telling me how strong I was, how lucky Daniel was to have me, and I believed them. I really did, because in my mind, that's what marriage was. Showing up, carrying each other when one of you couldn't stand, loving someone even when it wasn't easy. Daniel started improving after about a week. His color came back, his voice got stronger, and that familiar charm started creeping back in. "You're not getting rid of me that easily," he joked one afternoon. I smiled, relief flooding through me. I wasn't planning on it. He squeezed my hand again, just like he had that first night. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Those words meant everything to me at the time. Everything. When he was finally discharged, I brought him home, turning our house into something that barely resembled what it used to be. I organized the kitchen to make it easier for him to eat healthier. I set reminders for his medications. I even moved my workspace to the dining room so I could keep an eye on him while I worked remotely. My entire life shifted around him, and I didn't question it for a second. That's the part that still gets me. I didn't question anything.
Not the way he suddenly became more attentive, more affectionate than he'd been in years. Not the way he started asking more about my finances, my accounts, things he'd never cared about before. Not the occasional look on his face when he thought I wasn't paying attention. Something distant, calculating. I told myself it was the near-death experience, that it had changed him, made him appreciate life, appreciate me. I wanted to believe that so badly. And for a while I did. Until one afternoon, about a month after he came home, when I was looking for a document in his desk drawer and found something that made my entire world tilt on its axis. It was a folder, plain, nothing special, but inside it, there were papers I had never seen before, legal documents, financial agreements, and one line that made my heart stop in a completely different way than it had that night in the hospital. My name, attached to numbers I didn't recognize, and a date from before we even got married. That was the moment everything started to unravel. I didn't even realize I'd stopped breathing until my chest started to ache. I was just standing there in our home office, Daniel's desk drawer still half open, that folder in my hands like it weighed 100 pounds. The house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that makes every tiny sound feel amplified. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the wall clock down the hall, my own pulse pounding in my ears. I remember thinking, this doesn't make sense, because it didn't. Not at first. I sat down slowly in his chair, my hands trembling as I spread the papers out across the desk. There were multiple documents, all neatly organized. Contracts, statements, something that looked like a legal agreement drafted by a real attorney, not some generic template you'd pull off the internet. And my name, my full legal name, was typed across several of them. The date at the top of one page hit me again. 2 months before our wedding. 2 months. I swallowed hard, trying to piece together something, anything that could explain this. Maybe it was related to our mortgage?
No, that didn't make sense. We hadn't even started house hunting until after we got engaged. I kept reading. The language was formal, dense, but certain phrases stood out like flashing warning signs. Asset protection, marital financial integration, projected access. Projected access. To what? My stomach twisted as I flipped to the next page. There were numbers listed, large ones, not random, structured, calculated. It took me a few seconds to realize what I was looking at. They were estimates of my income, my bonuses, even projections of my career growth. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. How? I whispered to myself. None of this information was public, not in this level of detail, not the breakdowns, not the projections tied to my specific role, my firm. Someone had put serious effort into this. And then I saw it, at the bottom of one of the pages, a name. Not Daniel's, a law firm I didn't recognize, and beneath it, a signature. I leaned in closer, my vision blurring for a second before I forced it to focus. The signature wasn't mine, but right next to it was Daniel's. I jerked back like the paper had burned me. No, I said out loud, shaking my head. No, no, no. My mind started racing, trying to rewrite what I was seeing into something less horrifying. Maybe it was some kind of business plan. Maybe he was considering a joint investment strategy before we got married. But then why wouldn't he tell me? Why hide it? Why track my finances like a target? I flipped through the rest of the folder faster now, panic creeping up my spine. More documents, more calculations, notes scribbled in the margins. His handwriting. I knew his handwriting. Short phrases, underlined. Timing critical. After marriage, access expands. Maintain appearance. Maintain appearance. That was the moment something inside me cracked. I pushed back from the desk so hard the chair nearly tipped over. My hands were shaking uncontrollably now, my heart racing in a way that felt dangerously close to what I'd seen happen to him that night. This wasn't just weird. This wasn't just secretive. This was calculated, deliberate, and it had started before I ever walked down the aisle. I stumbled out of the office, the folder still clutched in my hand. The hallway felt longer than usual, the walls closing in. I could hear the TV faintly from the living room, some sports channel Daniel always left on in the background. He was there, just sitting there like everything was normal, like our life wasn't built on something I suddenly didn't recognize. I stopped just before the doorway, my chest rising and falling rapidly. For a second I considered putting the folder back, pretending I hadn't seen anything, giving myself time to think, but I couldn't. I needed to hear him explain this. I stepped into the living room. He was on the couch, one arm stretched across the back, his attention half on the TV, half on his phone. He looked relaxed, comfortable, safe. The sight of it made something dark twist inside me. "Daniel," I said. My voice sounded different, tighter. He glanced over, smiling automatically. "Hey, you okay? I thought you were working." I didn't answer his question. I just held up the folder. Everything about him changed in an instant. It was subtle. Most people probably wouldn't have noticed it, but I did. His smile faltered, not completely, just enough. His eyes flicked to the folder, then back to my face. And for a split second, there was something there. Recognition. And something colder. "Where did you get that?" he asked. No confusion. No curiosity. Just that. My grip on the folder tightened. "Your desk." He sat up a little straighter, his body no longer relaxed. "You were going through my things." I actually laughed. It came out sharp, almost unrecognizable. "Are you serious right now?" I asked, stepping closer. "That's what you're going with?" His jaw tightened. "I'm just asking." "No," I snapped. "You're deflecting." I tossed the folder onto the coffee table between us. The paper slid slightly, one corner bending. "Explain it." He didn't touch it. He just looked at me. And the silence stretched. Too long. Way too long. "What is all this?" I pressed, my voice rising despite my effort to keep it steady. "Why are there documents about my finances from before we were even married? Why are there projections of my income? Why is your signature on legal paperwork I've never seen?" Still nothing. My heart started pounding harder. "Say something, Daniel." He exhaled slowly, leaning back against the couch like he was thinking. Not panicking. Not scrambling. Thinking. And that scared me more than anything. "It's not what you think," he said finally. Of course it wasn't. "It's never what you think." "Then what is it?" I shot back immediately. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd seen 100 times before when he was stressed. But this felt different. Controlled. Measured. "I was trying to plan for our future," he said. I stared at him. "You were planning?" I repeated, disbelief flooding my voice. "By secretly tracking my income and drafting legal agreements behind my back." "It wasn't like that," he said quickly. "Then what was it like?" I demanded. He hesitated. Again. And that hesitation told me more than any words could.
"Daniel," I said, quieter now, but sharper. "Why does it say maintain appearance in your handwriting?" That hit him. I saw it. A flicker of something. Annoyance? Regret? I couldn't tell. "You weren't supposed to see that," he muttered. The words landed like a punch to the chest. Not denial, not shock, just inconvenience. I took a step back, staring at him like I was seeing a stranger. "Answer me." He looked away for a moment, then back at me. And when he spoke again, his voice had lost that familiar warmth. "It was a precaution," he said. "A precaution against what?" I asked. "Against instability," he replied. I felt my stomach drop. "My instability?" "No," he said, shaking his head. "Life's instability." "That doesn't explain any of this," I said, gesturing to the folder. He leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees. "Look, you were doing really well when we met. Your career was taking off, your income was strong. I just wanted to make sure we were protected." "We?" I echoed. "Yes, we." "By doing all of this behind my back?" I asked. "I didn't want to complicate things before the wedding," he said. That sentence, that one sentence.
Something about it snapped everything into place in the worst possible way. Before the wedding. Not after. Not during. Before. So you made plans, I said slowly, my voice dropping, based on my money before we were even married. His silence confirmed it. My chest tightened, anger and something deeper, more painful, rising together. Tell me the truth, I said, my voice barely above a whisper now. Did you marry me because you loved me, or because of this? For the first time since I walked into that room, Daniel looked uncomfortable. Not defensive, not angry, uncomfortable. Like I'd finally asked the question he didn't want to answer. Don't do that, he said quietly. Answer the question, I snapped. He looked at me, really looked at me, and for a moment I saw something almost human in his expression. But it didn't last. You're twisting this, he said. I let out a hollow laugh. Am I? He stood up then, closing the distance between us. I cared about you. I still do. Cared. Not love. Not loved. Cared. The word echoed in my head like a warning bell. And the money? I asked. He didn't answer right away. And that was all the answer I needed. Something inside me broke completely then. All the nights in that hospital chair. All the fear. All the love I thought we shared. It suddenly felt like I'd been playing a role in a story I didn't even know I was part of. You used me, I said, my voice shaking now despite everything. That's not fair, he replied, but there was no conviction behind it. It's exactly fair, I shot back. You planned this. You calculated it. You married me with a strategy. It wasn't just that, he insisted. Then what else was it? I demanded. He opened his mouth and then closed it. Because there wasn't anything else. The silence that followed felt suffocating. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time since I'd met him, I didn't see my husband. I saw a stranger who had almost died in my arms, and somehow that wasn't even the most shocking part anymore. I shook my head slowly, stepping back. I saved your life, I said, the words coming out raw, unfiltered. His expression flickered. And this is who you are. He didn't deny it. He didn't even try. And that's when I realized something that changed everything. I wasn't just hurt. I was done. I didn't leave right away. That's the part people don't usually understand when I tell this story. They expect some dramatic moment where I grab my keys, slam the door, and never look back. But that's not how it works when your entire life is tangled up with someone. When your house, your routines, your memories, everything has their fingerprints on it. I just stood there in the living room, staring at him, feeling like I was floating outside my own body. Daniel didn't move either. He watched me carefully, like he was trying to calculate what I would do next. That same look I'd seen in his notes, measured, strategic. It made my skin crawl. You should get some rest, he said finally, like we'd just had a minor disagreement about dinner plans. I blinked at him, not sure I'd heard that right. Rest? You've been under a lot of stress, he continued. This is a lot to process. I let out a short, disbelieving laugh. You think I'm overwhelmed? I think you're reacting emotionally, he said. There it was, that shift. Like he'd flipped a switch from husband to something else entirely. I folded my arms, trying to steady myself. I just found out my husband planned our marriage like a financial investment. Yeah, I'd say I'm reacting. He exhaled, clearly irritated now. You're exaggerating. No, I said quietly. I'm finally seeing clearly. That seemed to hit a nerve. For a second, his composure slipped. You're acting like I didn't care about you at all. I held his gaze. Did you? He hesitated again. That hesitation was becoming the loudest answer in the room. I did, he said finally. Just not in the way you're making it sound. I shook my head slowly. There is no better way to make it sound. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. I could feel something changing inside me. Not just anger or sadness, but something colder, sharper, like a part of me was shutting down, sealing itself off from whatever this was. Because if I let myself feel everything at once, I think it would have destroyed me. I need some air, I said. He didn't stop me. Of course he didn't. I grabbed my keys and walked out of the house, not even bothering with a jacket, even though the evening air had that early fall chill. The sky was dim, streetlights flickering on one by one as I walked down the sidewalk with no real destination in mind. I just needed space,
Distance. Something that wasn't him. I ended up sitting in my car, parked a few blocks away, staring at nothing. My hands were still shaking slightly, but my thoughts were starting to settle into something more focused, more dangerous, because the shock was wearing off, and clarity was taking its place. I replayed everything in my head, every conversation, every decision, every moment I'd brushed off because I trusted him, the way he'd always been curious about my job, but never in a supportive way, more like he was gathering information, the way he pushed for us to combine finances earlier than I was comfortable with, the way he never seemed stressed about money, even when he didn't have a steady income. At the time, I told myself it was confidence. Now it felt like something else entirely. I leaned back in the seat, staring at the roof of the car, my mind racing. If he had planned this before we got married, if those documents were real and not just some abstract idea, then what had he actually done since? What access did he have? What had he already taken? My stomach dropped. I sat up straight, grabbing my phone. I opened my banking app first. Everything looked normal at a glance. Balances where they should be. No obvious red flags. But that didn't mean anything. If Daniel had been planning this for years, he wouldn't be sloppy. I started digging deeper, scrolling through transaction histories, looking for anything unusual. Small transfers, unfamiliar charges, anything that didn't belong. At first, nothing stood out. Then I noticed it.
A series of transfers. Not large enough to trigger immediate concern, but consistent. Spread out over months. Different amounts, different dates. All going to the same account. My heart started pounding again as I clicked into one of the transactions. The account name wasn't his. It was under an LLC. I frowned, my mind scrambling to connect the dots. Daniel had mentioned once, briefly, that he was thinking about starting something. I hadn't paid much attention at the time. He had ideas all the time. But this looked real and funded by me. No, I whispered, shaking my head as I went back further. There were more, dozens of them, over the past 2 years. I did a rough calculation in my head and the number made me feel sick. Tens of thousands of dollars, maybe more. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white. He hadn't just planned this. He'd been executing it, slowly, carefully, quietly, right under my nose. A wave of anger hit me so hard I had to close my eyes. All those nights I stayed late at work, all the stress, the pressure, the sacrifices, and he'd been siphoning it off like it was nothing. I let out a shaky breath, forcing myself to think. Reacting emotionally wasn't going to help me now. He was right about one thing. This was a lot to process. But what he didn't realize was that I wasn't the kind of person who stayed in shock for long. I adapted. I analyzed. That's how I built my career. And now, that part of me was waking up. I opened my contacts and hovered over his name. For a second, I considered calling him, confronting him with this new information, forcing him to explain. But I stopped myself. No, that's what he would expect. That's what he was prepared for. If he had been doing this for years, he wasn't going to suddenly break under pressure. He'd lie, deflect, minimize, just like he already had. I needed something else, something he wasn't expecting. I scrolled instead to a different contact, my lawyer. I hadn't spoken to her in months, not since she helped me review some contracts at work, but she was good, sharp, the kind of person who didn't miss details. My finger hovered for a moment. This felt like crossing a line. But then I thought about the hospital, about holding his hand, begging him to stay alive, about how close he came to dying, and how none of that stopped him from being exactly who he was. I hit call. She picked up on the third ring. "Hey, it's been a while." "Yeah," I said, my voice steadier now. "I need your help." There was a pause, just long enough for her to sense the shift in my tone. "What's going on?" I looked out the windshield, the streetlights casting long shadows across the empty road. "I think my husband has been moving money out of my accounts without my knowledge," I said. Another pause, longer this time. "Okay," she said carefully. "Start from the beginning." And I did. I told her everything. The folder, the documents, the notes, the transactions I just found. She didn't interrupt much, just asked a few precise questions here and there. When I finished, the silence on the line felt heavier than before. "That's serious," she said finally. "I know. Do you have access to all your accounts right now?" "Yes." "Good. First thing, don't confront him again. Not yet." A small, bitter smile tugged at my lips. Wasn't planning on it. "Second, we need to secure your assets immediately. Change passwords, freeze anything you can, and we're going to start documenting everything." "Okay." "And third," she hesitated slightly,
You need to prepare for the possibility that this is bigger than what you've already seen. I closed my eyes. Bigger. Of course it was. Because someone like Daniel wouldn't stop at enough. Yeah, I said, quietly. I figured. I ended the call a few minutes later, my mind already shifting into a different mode. Less emotional, more strategic. I sat there for a while longer, letting everything settle into place. Then I started making moves. I changed every password I could think of. Banking, email, investment accounts, anything he might have had access to. I set up alerts for transactions. I froze certain accounts temporarily. Every step felt like reclaiming a piece of something he had taken. By the time I was done, the sky had gone completely dark. I stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked the same, but I didn't feel the same. Not even close. Because something inside me had shifted permanently. I wasn't just the wife who saved her husband's life anymore. I was the woman who finally saw the truth. And for the first time since I found that folder, I wasn't afraid. I started the car, my hands steady now. I knew exactly what I was going to do next. But what Daniel didn't know was that I wasn't going to leave. Not yet. Because if he thought he had been planning all this time, he had no idea who he was really dealing with.